So Ian and Stephen had invited me over to speak because my specialist area is not so much the EU, but it's deep geopolitics, deep global geopolitics. So over the last decade plus, my area of research has been looking at the globalist agenda, the move towards globalization, and the way in which this is achieved, i.e. through a process of gradualism. And what I'm going to try and do this evening is join some of the dots for you to show you that what's occurring in the EU is actually part of a very, very big game. Now, the vote next week is obviously not insignificant, but as I'm sure you will appreciate, these guys writing the scripts here, they have a game plan already in place, ready to deal with the no vote. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through the evening, because for reasons that I hope will become clear, it is by rejecting, if you like, the Treaty of Lisbon at this juncture, and the Irish people, of course, are, unfortunately, the chosen ones here, voting on behalf of 500 million Europeans who have been denied that opportunity. And as the Irish EU Commissioner, Charlie McCreevy, has acknowledged, he knows and accepts that had the Europeans had the opportunity of voting, 95% would have voted no, which pretty much tells the story, doesn't it? But I want to dedicate this evening, in fact last night and this evening, to this guy, Raymond Crotty. A couple of the guys over here last night have heard this, of course, but for any of you that weren't here, are you familiar with Raymond Crotty? You know who he is? Well, this is a tragedy, and it's a classic case of a guy that has been erased from recent history. And I hope that maybe in times to come, there's actually statues of this guy, and that his contribution to these proceedings, if you like, is recognised, because we wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for Raymond Crotty. Raymond Crotty was a social scientist, and he was a visionary because he saw what was occurring in Europe and was very concerned about his home country, Ireland. So he took a case to the Irish Supreme Court in the mid-1980s, and in 1987 he managed to win a Supreme Court ruling, an Irish Supreme Court ruling, which stated categorically that the Irish Constitution could not be usurped in any way, shape or form without a referendum. So there's a popular misconception that there was something written into the Irish Constitution from way back when, that a referendum would be necessary to change the Constitution. That was not the case. Or if it was the case, it wasn't ratified, if you like, in law. So Raymond Crotty absolutely managed to establish that the Irish Constitution was sacrosanct, pending a referendum. Nobody else, anywhere else in Europe, had the foresight to see that. And of course, tragically, he didn't live, to see the fruits of his efforts. So, Raymond Crotty, go take a look at this guy for yourself, because I hope that this guy, becomes a name that is known to all people throughout Ireland. And what we've seen, and you've witnessed it for longer than I have been sort of just following it for a few weeks, and obviously specifically the last couple of days, but this phenomenal campaign based on fear. The Yes campaign is very evidently long on emotion, short on facts. I mean, this is how it's being presented. Now, in the time I've been here, from the time I landed in Dublin, I started to do a straw poll, and I was sort of stopping and chatting with people and asking them, if they had a vote, and then asking them, which way they were prepared to share with me, which way they were going to vote. And then, depending on that, then I was asking them if they'd actually read any part of the Treaty of Lisbon. And interesting enough, everybody who told me they were going to vote yes had never read any part of the Treaty of Lisbon. Now, to put that in perspective, 2 out of the 6 people that I asked who said they were going to vote no, 2 of them had said they had read the Treaty of Lisbon, so it's still 30%. But I'm going to share some observations with you, and I'm sure you see this yourself. Here we go. Families struggle to cope with debt surge. No to Lisbon will deepen our economic crisis, experts warn. Based on what? You know, there's no supporting statement of that. It's an emotional statement. I mean, fundamentally, the world is in a mess right now, thanks to globalization. You know, the observation that I used was the analogy was given to me by an economist about a couple of years ago when we were talking about where we were heading. And he said, you know, Ian, what globalization is like a hotel being built without any fire doors, or a ship being built without any watertight doors. So if there's a fire in the hotel, without any fire doors, the fire just rages right through the building and the building's destroyed. Obviously the fire doors are there for a reason, and that's to contain the fire, so that that part of the hotel is probably destroyed, but it's only a part of the hotel. And the same with the ship. If it's holed, you can isolate the hull with the watertight doors and effectively salvage the ship, save the ship, get it to port, repair the damage. But if you've got no watertight doors, it's going to go to the bottom. And that's what globalization has effectively done. Because before globalization, where you had sovereign nations that had borders that they could effectively shut down, the moment there was a sign of any crisis in a specific country, and of course there have been many, then the country could actually effect a lockdown and protect itself. But with open borders, and of course it has been created deliberately, as I'll explain later, with open borders, once particularly the US and the UK were in a world of hurt, and other countries had followed similar policies of effectively lending money that they should never have been lending to keep the consumerist, materialist market buoyant, there was a degree of inevitability that we were going to go into a global recession. So this has nothing to do with Treaty of Lisbon, period. The cost of national debt to soar to 210 million on no vote. It actually doesn't matter which way the vote goes right now. The debt's going to soar, period. It has nothing at all to do with the vote. The rejection of Lisbon will hit families in the pocket. How? Where's the substantiation behind these observations? This was from a commentator in the UK. It's all the politics of fear at its worst. It's absolutely the politics of fear at its worst. I'm going to use their tactics against them, as we go through. And then, this was in the Sun today, the Irish Sun. And this is by the Referendum Commission. Now, unless I've missed something, I thought the Referendum Commission was effectively impartial. And was supposed to be managing the referendum and ensuring that effectively the whole thing was given the appropriate political balance, right? I may be wrong. Well, let me just sort of read you this here, because this was a quarter-page advert in the Sun, or more than a quarter page, it's actually about a third of a page, because here it is here. Now, I know it's in the Sun, but look at this. Let's get an expansion of this part of it here. It says, what do I know about the treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, and decision-making in the EU? Now listen carefully. The Council of Ministers is made up of one minister from each of the 27 EU countries. So far, so good. The European Parliament is directly elected by all of us. Ooh, I would question that statement. Right now, some decisions require the agreement of the European Parliament, but the Council of Ministers can still decide on some things all on its own. If the Treaty of Lisbon is ratified, there will be more issues that require the agreement of the European Parliament. These include agriculture, for example, and decisions on the entire EU budget. So now you know. Know what? I must have read that half a dozen times, and I still haven't got a clue what he's trying to say. I mean, there are some things in there that are fundamentally wrong, like decisions on the entire EU budget. I mean, where does that statement come from? The MEPs have no responsibility in any way, shape or form for the EU budget. And for those of you who aren't aware, I mean, the EU accounts